Hello and welcome to this class where we're going to talk about what Python is, what it's used for, why it's so popular, and why you have to start learning it today. If we look online, we can find several definitions. One being that Python is a high-level, general-purpose programming language. Its design philosophy emphasizes code readability with the use of significant indentation. This is just one of various definitions, but basically, to summarize, we can say that Python is a flexible programming language that is designed to be easy to read. These two characteristics have made Python to be one of the most famous and most popular programming languages in the world. Python was created in 1991 by Guido van Rossum, and though it seems like the name Python refers to a snake, it actually isn't. It really comes from the British comedy group Monty Python. You might know them for some of their comedy movies and series they did in the UK. They're quite fun. So, why do we have to learn Python? Well, one of the reasons is because it's very popular and is one of the most used languages in the world. Here, we can see the results of a Stack Overflow survey on developers and the different programming languages that they use. You can see first we have JavaScript and HTML or CSS. Many of you will know that HTML and CSS aren't really programming languages, but well, that's a separate topic. But basically these two are for web design, right? JavaScript and HTML and CSS. If we are talking about general purpose programming languages, we can see that Python clearly is the winner here. So it's the most popular, and 50% of people who did this survey are using Python. We can also go to Stack Overflow to see the percentage of questions asked that month, and we can see how they have been evolving over the years for the different programming languages. You can see that around 2010, Python was not that popular. There are other languages which were a bit more popular. And since then, it's been increasing in popularity and is clearly one of the most popular programming languages. We know this as well as ChatGPT uses Python in its sandbox. It's part of the advanced data analysis plugin that works behind ChatGPT. It does all your code in Python. So we talked about a lot of reasons why I think you should learn Python, but let's give you a couple more. Python is a very easy programming language to learn for beginners, much easier than other languages, and that's why it's generally chosen by beginners. It also has a wide community and support system, a large number of libraries and frameworks, which means it's very versatile and cross-platform. For all these reasons, Python has become the most popular programming language. But what is Python used for? It can be used for many applications, from web development using Django and Flask, data analysis with different libraries like Pandas, NumPy, and many more. It's also used for artificial intelligence and machine learning. We can also use it to automate tasks and to create scripts, data flows, etc. There are so many things you can do with Python, and that is why it's become so popular in recent years. I just wanted to mention the difference between Python 2 or Python 3. What's the difference, Python 2 and Python 3? Well, they are simply versions of Python. Python 3 is the one that is used today. You might see Python 2 in older applications, but probably any Python code that you'll see nowadays is in Python 3. It's just to let you know that nowadays we have Python 3.x. I can't remember right now if it's 11 or 12 or 13, but the versions are updated quite often, but staying on the third version. So I just wanted to show you a small introduction to the syntax of Python. And here we compare Python 2 and Python 3. We see the function print. As we can see, Python 2 was written as print, hello world, without parentheses, but nowadays all functions in Python 3 use parentheses. So we have print, parentheses, hello world. So this is a very simple function, simple syntax, just to introduce you to the syntax of Python. And the last thing I wanted to mention was the philosophy of Python, the Zen of Python. The Zen of Python is a collection of 20 principles that influence the design of the Python programming language. 19 of them were written by Tim Peters in 1999, and this text is distributed as public domain. We can mention a few of them. For example, beautiful is better than ugly, explicit is better than implicit, simple is better than complex, complex is better than complicated, flat is better than nested, sparse is better than dense, and readability counts. There are several more. If we go to our Python terminal and open Python and we write import this, we will see how the different principles of the Zen of Python are outputted. There are a couple more. I invite you to look at them in your own time. So in this class, we've had a small introduction to Python, what it is, why it's so popular, what it's used for, and you've now seen an example of the syntax of Python. And we've quickly mentioned the philosophy, the Zen of Python. So that's all for this quick introduction to Python. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was useful. And I'll see you in the next class. Hello and welcome to this class where we're going to try to understand exactly what a Jupyter Notebook is. And this is important since we're going to use it as part of our Python course. So if we search online, we can find a lot of definitions, but one I like is that Jupyter Notebook is an open source web application that allows you to create and share documents containing live code, equations, visualizations, and narrative text. So a Jupyter Notebook is basically a notebook where we can write text, we can write code, we can run code, obviously, and we can share documents, and this is widely used to learn at work, to show work, code you have done, and to share it with your colleagues, and to have everything documented, and to comment all our code. So this is what it looks like locally. So when we install our Jupyter Notebook locally and we run it locally, this is the appearance it has. In this course, we will have the option to run it locally, and this is the way that I will work while we do the course, or you can use Google Colab, which is like this. We will show you also how to access Google Colab. Google Colab is obviously a free app within our Google suite, so where we can create these notebooks, we can prepare all our work, we can share it with people, and we will use it in our course. As I said, you can choose to use it locally and install it through Anaconda or within Google Colab, but you'll see that in the following classes. One important thing to note is that all Jupyter Notebooks have the extension IPYNB. So whenever you see this extension, this is a Jupyter Notebook. Both notebooks locally and the ones you download online will have this extension. So where can we create these notebooks? I've already mentioned we can create it locally. If you're working on a Mac or on a Windows, you can create these notebooks locally. Also, you can work with them inside Visual Code Studio or Google Colab online. But there are other platforms such as Kaggle, which allow you also to work inside the platform using these Jupyter Notebooks. As you can see, working with Jupyter Notebooks while we're learning to code, and especially in Python, is a very popular method. All right, so as we said, in the next classes, we'll show you how to install Jupyter Notebooks locally or how to work with it online. So you can use either of these ways to work. As I said, I will be working locally, so if you want to have the same interface as I do, install it locally through Anaconda. So that's it for an introduction to Jupyter Notebooks. I hope you liked it, and I'll see you in the next class. Hello everyone, and in this class we're going to download Anaconda to be able to create our environment locally using Jupyter Notebooks inside Anaconda. So the first thing we're going to do is go to Google and search for Anaconda. You should see the first result. We can click that and we can click on free download. As you see, it automatically detects I'm on a Mac, so well, I can download it. If you're on a Windows, you can click here. Well, you can download depending on which Mac you're on. I'm on Mac M1. So I'm going to click on download. Perfect. So let's wait for it to download. And once it's downloaded, we'll install it. Okay, this is downloaded, so we can install. We can click continue, 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 and agree. Let's install it. Perfect, so it's already been installed. I'm gonna hit continue and close and move the installer to the bin. All right. And now we should see you have Anaconda Navigator opened. As you can see, we can install many things, Visual Code, Oracle, well, many things. But let's focus on this course. We're going to focus on Jupyter Notebooks. But before we launch Jupyter Notebooks, let's go to the environment. And we're going to learn a bit about what the environment is. Basically, as the name indicates, it is an environment where I will have all my work and all my packages installed. For example, if I need to work with Python for a specific thing and I want to install some packages, well, I don't need the packages in a different environment. I can install the specific packages I need for that environment. So I always advise to create a new environment depending on what you're going to work on. So we click create, we can put the name, we can call it Python. It'll create it there in my environment, and it'll use that version. Let's keep 3.11 for now. Okay, so I'm going to click create, and we'll see how it's creating our new environment called Python. So let's wait until it creates. Okay, so it's installed. If we go back to home, we'll see we have to reinstall Jupyter Notebooks. So let's install it in this new environment, and once installed, you will see how it launches. So let's click launch, and now you'll see the terminal opens, and we should launch on Chrome. Okay, it starts running on localhost :888/3. This is where it should always run. And you'll see a screen with different files, basically our main directory. In this case, my main directory is inside my username, and everything I work with will be here in this directory. To create a new notebook, I just click on New Notebook, but before doing that, let's create a new folder, and I'm going to call that new folder Python. Okay, so here we have it, and now I'm inside the folder. I can go click New Notebook, and super easy to create a new notebook. Select the kernel. I'll keep Python 3, so I'll just click Select. You can click Always Start if you want, but we can just click Select. And as you can see, I've created a Python 3 kernel, a Jupyter Notebook with a Python 3 kernel created locally. Hopefully you were able to follow the steps. In the next classes, we'll learn how to work with Jupyter Notebooks. I'll show you your first steps and how to operate Jupyter Notebooks. I'll also talk to you about cells and kernels, etc. So we'll dive deeper into Jupyter Notebooks in the next class. That's all for this class. I hope you like it, and I'll see you in the next class. Okay, so if you prefer to work online, we're going to work with something called Google Colab. So let's search for Google Colab, and it should be the first link. So we can click on Welcome to Collaboratory, and you'll see we can automatically open Jupyter Notebooks. So for this, we're going to need Google accounts. I already have a Google account because I have a Gmail email, and I use Drive. If you have an email that ends with Gmail, you already have a Google account. If not, you will have to create one. So we're not going to go into how to create one in this class, but if you don't have one, please create one. If you have one, you should see something similar to what I'm showing on screen. So it already asks me in this screen to open one of my recent notebooks. I can connect to Google Drive, to GitHub. I can upload a Google Notebook. I can upload a Jupyter Notebook, or I can see some of the examples. For now, I'm just going to click cancel, and I'm going to leave this by default. This is a Jupyter Notebook. If you go to File, Download, you'll see that you can download the IPYNB extension, which is the extension for Jupyter Notebooks. As you can see, the interface to Jupyter Notebooks locally compared to Google Colab is slightly different, but it works in the same way. We have our text, our markdown text. We also have our code. right? To follow the course, the classes will be in the offline, in the local Jupyter Notebook format. So if you want to see exactly what I see on screen, I recommend you to use the other way to work with Jupyter Notebook locally, right? Using Anaconda, which we showed you how to install in the previous class. If not, you can perfectly work using Google Colab and you just follow along with a slightly different interface, but the functionality is exactly the same as I mentioned. Obviously here it tells you 0 configuration required, access to GPUs free of charge, and easy to share, right? So it's also a valid option. All right, so we have these two options to work offline and online using Google Colab. It's up to you to decide which to work with. Both options are valid. All right, so let's continue with the course. Hope you understood the difference between Jupyter Notebooks local using Anaconda and Google Colab using your Google account. And let's not waste any more time and let's continue with the course. All right, now that we have our first notebook created, I wanted to show you how it's saved within my file system. So in my directory, I can see that I have this folder and I have the name untitled1, right? So I can change this to notebook1. As you see, the extension is IPYNB. And well, I've renamed it to notebook1. If we go back to our file, we can see it's been renamed to notebook1. Okay, so there are two terms that we have to mention. One is the cell, okay? Very simple. We can add cells, delete cells. Now we'll see, in the next class, we'll see some shortcuts, some keyboard shortcuts that can be useful to us. And another concept we need to talk about is the kernel. The kernel is like the Python environment. There are times when the code can get stuck, either it disconnects or you have a problem in your computer and it may restart the kernel. So if we have any problem, we can restart the kernel ourselves. Once it restarts, it's activated and then we continue to work. So here we have the cell, and the first thing we see here that we have in blue is it means we're in command mode, and I can type print hello world. This is the typical thing we type when we learn how to code. So, and now I can press Shift Enter, and we'll see how it returns hello world. And a new cell is created for us. So that's code. We can see that we select there, we can see code. But we can also select and change it to Markdown. And Markdown is simply a piece of text. So here I can select Markdown and I can write Markdown. And I hit Shift Enter. I can put it up. I can type this is Markdown. Basically, it's part of text. It's not code. And it allows us to add some text that we want to use to describe part of this document. With Python, we can also do calculations. I can do 1 + 1 = 2. Super simple, but well, you know what already are cells and how to make calculations. You also know what Markdown is. It's basically a text that is used to write in the document. They're not calculations or code. So in the next class, we'll see some shortcuts that you should learn to work with. Basically, it's important to learn to work with shortcuts. This allows us to work faster and more efficiently. So that's all for this class as an introduction to your first Jupyter Notebook. I hope you liked it, and I'll see you in the next class. Hello, in this class we're going to look at some of the keyboard shortcuts that work with Jupyter Notebook, which are very useful. There are quite a lot of keyboard shortcuts, but these are the main ones that I think you should know. To insert a cell above, you press A. To insert a cell below, you press B. To change a cell to Markdown, you press M. We've done this manually, but you can also do it with this shortcut. We can delete cells with X or double D. And we can undo with Z, okay? We don't have to press Ctrl Z or Command Z. We literally just press Z and it will undo. So these are the ones that are the most used. I believe you should learn these to work more efficiently with Jupyter Notebooks. In the next class, we'll see how to do it practically directly inside our Jupyter Notebooks. All right, so that's all for this class. I hope you liked it. I'll see you in the next class. Alright, so let's try some of these shortcuts. I want you to try them so you get used to using these shortcuts. Okay, if I click here on the cell and I press A, as you see, it inserts one above. If I click on the cell and press B, it inserts it below. If I'm in the cell and I press M, it changes it to Markdown, have you seen? And if I want to delete it, I can do X or I can do double D. And if I want to undo, I press Z. Okay, not Control Z, just Z. These are some of the shortcuts you can use. Try them for yourself, play around with them, get used to them. In the next class, we'll look at some other things we can do inside our notebook with Markdown, etc. All right, so that's all for this class. I hope you liked it. I'll see you in the next class. Alright, so another thing I wanted to show you is when it's doing calculations or the cell is running, what happens when we're running these cells. So let's import a library called time. So let's start with this library, let's import time, and then let's use a function called sleep, time.sleep, and let's make it wait for 10 seconds. 5 seconds is okay. Alright, so we hit enter, and as you can see, the cell is running, and after 5 seconds, it finishes running. So I wanted to show you that when the cell is running, we see this asterisk, which means that the cell is still running. Okay, let's talk a bit more about Markdown. So let's change this cell to Markdown with M, and we can start writing Markdown. So the first thing we're going to talk about is headers. So we have different types of headers. If I type hashtag heading 1, and I hit Shift Enter, you'll see that I have a heading. Okay, I can click again on the cell, type M, inside the cell is now Markdown. So I can create a second title with a double hashtag. And for 3, it's basically the same. It's 3 hashtags for heading 3. Okay. Each of them is smaller and I can open and close each of them. All right. If I can press B, I can create a new cell and I can put another Markdown. I can literally press M and type Markdown. And I could also type some code underneath. Okay. So this is a way of organizing our notebooks with titles and Markdown. So we're explaining what we're doing. And it's pretty important to learn how to do this. If we want to put it in bold, simply we're going to write 2 asterisks on either side. This would be in bold. If we want italic, we're going to put it here. We can do it in several ways. We can put an underscore on each side. So we have 2 asterisks for bold and 1 underscore for Markdown at the beginning, at the end. And we can also type asterisk, Markdown, asterisk. This, we need to make it Markdown, not code. Okay, and this also works for italic. Okay, let's make some lists. We can literally type asterisk 1, asterisk 2, and this is a list within Markdown. We can also make a link, example, within brackets, and we can add the link, google.com, and this will create a link which will take you to Google. So make sure we type it correctly. Sometimes it doesn't understand, so I think we need to put the HTTPS in. Yeah. Okay, so this is the correct format. Then we click and it opens google.com. Okay, so that's a link. So we can also put links within our Markdown. Another thing we can do is create a code block. Let's make a block. We can insert code inside a block. So we can use these 3 ticks to insert a code block inside, right? So let's just copy and paste some code and see how this works. Okay, so we have like a code block inside our Markdown. And this we can also do by using 4 spaces to indent. This will also create code within our Markdown, okay? So remember, we have the bold, we have italic in 2 different ways. We can create lists, we can create links, and we can create a block of code in these 2 ways. Right, all of this is important so we can organize our documents. Another thing we can do is add images. I'm going to go to Google and just search for an image. Let's just copy and paste, put it inside our folder. Let's call it image. All right, it's web.p. Let's change it to PNG. So let's just literally type PNG. Okay, use PNG. Okay, so we have our image. And how do we do it? We can literally just drag and drop into, it has to be Markdown, of course, and we can drag and drop, and there we have inserted an image. Okay, this is a local image because it's, as you see, it's a local attachment, but also I can insert a URL inside, so I can copy the link and literally, you see, if I paste the link, I'm going to have to copy that image address, so that's the link to the image, not to the website, and I can literally paste it into here, and now it's basically taking this image directly from the internet. Obviously, I have to convert to Markdown, but there you see it. Okay, so we've done it in 2 ways, with locally and connecting to the internet directly from the internet. Okay, so we can insert images this way. And finally, let's see the comments, okay? Remember that we print hello world. Let's put it in here, but I can insert a comment. I can create it as a comment by just adding a hashtag. Okay, this is hashtag in code. Remember, hashtag in Markdown creates the heading, but hashtag in code creates a comment. Okay, I can add an extra comment. I can use this to explain the function, explain what I'm doing, etc. So this is important, and it's a very good practice when we are writing code. It's a very good practice to comment it and explain what we're doing. Okay, another way to comment is in comment blocks with 3 double quotes. Okay, we need to close it as well. There we go. So that's a comment as well. And we can write whatever we want inside this comment, and this is all comments. Okay. So if I run this, you'll see it runs just hello world. It does not run the comment block. Okay, this is another way to create longer comments, not just 1-line comment. Okay. All right, so this is everything for this quick class to more functionality that you can use in your Jupyter Notebook, using Markdown, using comments, right? All this is very important when we're writing code inside our Jupyter Notebooks. So, well, I hope you understood the difference between code, between Markdown, and how we can use this inside our Jupyter Notebooks. All right, so that's everything for this class. I hope you liked it. We'll see you in the next class. Hello, and in this class we're going to talk about variables and data types that exist in Python. So first, let's start with the question, what is a variable? A variable in programming is like a container in memory that stores data. You can think about a variable like a box where you can save things, data, with a label. And the label is used to identify that variable. Variables store a value or text that can change during code execution, and they have an associated type. So we have an associated data type. This can be numbers, text, true, false. We'll see all this in a second. So if I type x equals 5, then the variable x, its value is 5. And it'll be a numeric data type because I'm assigning a number. So Python allows you to create these variables easily without having to declare the type before, like you would do in other programming languages. So one thing you have to take into account is that variables have to start with a letter or underscore. They can contain numbers, letters, and underscores. However, they cannot start with numbers. Another thing to keep in mind is that they're case sensitive. For example, lowercase x is a variable and a capital X is another different variable. And we'll see this when we do the practice in Jupyter Notebooks. And what good practices exist when creating variables? So the first thing we need to do, obviously, is to create descriptive names to be able to make our code more legible. And obviously, we will avoid long variable names to make sure they're not confusing. All right, so now that we know what a variable in Python is, let's talk about what the different data types that exist in Python. There are various data types that exist in Python, but let's have a look at the most basic ones and the ones you need to start learning to be able to program most things in Python. First, we have string, which is basically just text. For example, when we printed hello world, the output was a string, it was text. We also have integer, and this is a whole number, any whole number. Then we have float, which would be a decimal number, and boolean, which would be true or false. Already with these 4 data types, we can do a lot of things in Python. And in the next class, we're going to create a new Jupyter Notebook and start working with these data types so you understand how they work. So that's all for this class. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next class. Alright, so let's go to the folder we've created for this course, and let's create a new notebook. Alright, so we're gonna select, we're gonna change the name to notebook 2. And in this notebook, we're going to see some of the data types, types of data that we can use in Python. But let's first use some Markdown, and let's write a heading, data types. All right, let's put a heading 2. Remember, it's with 2 hashtags. And let's type string. And now we can type a string. For example, hello world. All right, remember it has to go within single quotes, and we press enter, shift enter, and we can see the output. I can assign this to variable y, for example. Now we would have hello world assigned to y. There's a function called type, which it can be used to see the type of data, and we can write type and y, and we can see that we get str. This means that it's a string. Okay, and I can obviously print y, and I would get the same output, hello world. All right, so we've seen string. Let's see what integer is. Let's write a second title in Markdown, obviously. Integer, and as we've done before, we can type x equals 5, and that means that 5 has been assigned to x. And we can use the function type with x to see what data type it is. And as you can see, it's integer, right? We get the output int. We can also have a negative value, so we can do x equals -5, and then x would equal -5. If we put type x for a negative value, you also see that we have int, right? So that's integer. All right, so we know what string is, we know what integer is. Let's see what float is. Let's go back to Markdown. Let's type our title, float. And we can create a decimal number, z equals 5.5. And we can do type z, and we will see that it is a float, all right? Anytime there's a decimal number, it will be a float. Whenever it's a whole number, it'll be an integer. We can also create a negative decimal number. This will also be a float. All right, so we know what string is, we know what integer is, we know what float is, but also we can create boolean, right? So let's type boolean in a second title. If we type x equals true, you'll see that there it appears in green. That's basically anytime you type true or false, it detects that you're typing true or false. It's not text, it's a boolean, and it's a different data type. So I can also do it with false, right? And I can output each of these with shift enter, and you will see that also I can add them, all right? And I add them and I get a 1. And why is this? Because when we are talking about Boolean numbers, true is considered 1 and false is considered 0. So if you add 1 plus 0, you will get 1, right? So remember that. True is 1, false is 0. And this is useful sometimes if we have a column full of true and false values. If we add the whole column, all values, this is a way to do a count of true values, right? And this is something general in programming, right? Always a 1 will be true and a 0 will be false, just for you to take that into account. All right, so let's now talk about variables. Let's put this in Markdown, and we've mentioned what variables are. Remember, they are case sensitive. So if we do x equals 5 and we do capital X equals 6, they will be different variables, right? I can output x and I can put capital X and I will get different results. So we have to take that into account. Okay, so we can also do calculations. Let's type in calculations in Markdown. So we have y, z, and x. So we can do some summing. So let's do x, z plus y. Assign that to w, and we can see that w is minus 0.5, right? So we can do these calculations using variables. So take into account that if we subtract 5 from minus 5.5, we are left with minus 0.5, and because y is false, which is 0, it stays at minus 0.5. So we can do any type of calculations using variables. All right, so let's practice a bit our calculations, and we're going to do this with something called the BMI index, or the body mass index. And let's do a quick example. So the BMI, or body mass index, is a way to calculate our mass, right? Our body mass. It's a percentage, and it's basically the weight of a person divided by the height squared. So let's type this in Markdown. So BMI equals weight divided by height squared. Okay, so we will keep this as a comment. This is one way to write comments in Python. We will see other ways in a sec. All right, so I'm going to copy and paste directly an image from online. Okay, I have to change this into Markdown. All right, so there's my body mass index. So let's calculate my body mass index to see if I'm underweight, normal, overweight, etc. Let's do this. Okay, and I'm going to do it using variables. So I'm going to type weight equals 75, which is I'm 75 kilos. I type height, I'm 1.8 meters. And my BMI will be weight divided by my height squared. All right. So the squared is a double asterisk. Okay, this is we have to remember that when we're doing squared in Python, it's a double asterisk. Okay, so now I've done the calculation and I can output the BMI, and it's 23.1415. So I'm about normal. I can use type to see what data type it is, and it's a float. Obviously, it's a decimal number. So perfect. So we could even use a function, for example, round, to round this to do 2 decimal places, 23.15. If we wanted to see a bit more info about this function, we can type a question mark and then round, and this gives us a bit more information about this function. All right, so we round a number to a given precision, decimal digits. It gives us information about the function. We'll see this a bit later in a different class. So I wanted to talk to you about sum, right? About summing values, summing data types, just to see this quickly. So if we do 1 plus 1, we get 2, right? So, but what happens if we try to sum strings? Text, right? So what happens if we do A equals hello and then B equals world? What happens here? So if we type A plus B, we get hello world. Okay, and why does this happen? Because every time you try to sum text, right, strings, they are concatenated. Okay, so that's something that's very important to take into account. If we use numbers or integers, right, the data type integer, it's a normal numeric sum, but for strings, they get concatenated. Okay, let's talk a bit about Boolean again. I know we've mentioned it already, but I wanted to show you the function true. So when we type true, we see that it's a bool, right? Boolean. But let's say I want to use a 0 and convert it to Boolean. I can use the function bool 0, and you'll see it outputs at false, and bool 1 is true. Okay, remember I told you 0 is false and 1 is true, so I can do that this way using the bool function to transform our numeric data type into a Boolean. Okay. So we've converted using bool, but you can also convert using str to string. Okay, let's do this in the comments. We can also use int to convert to integer and float to convert to float, right? So these are converting data types, which we can do through these functions. So to finish this class, let's do a quick example of the S&P 500. Well, let's do this in a comment. Let's put it in Markdown, actually, for a title. So for those of you that don't know, the S&P 500 is basically an ETF, an index fund where people can invest in the 500 top American companies. And let's do a quick calculation. It's very well known that throughout history, whenever you invest in this ETF, you get an average return of about 7% annually. And this is just throughout history, so it's not this doesn't happen for every year, obviously, but it's an average over the historic values. So let's write returns 7% annually. So that's an average. Obviously, this is not investment advice, but just this is the common cited value, right? So if you put money into the S&P 500, on average, based on the past, it will increase 7%. All right, so let's type investment. And that's, let's say we've invested $1,000. And let's type years. So we've invested over 5 years, for example. And we can put our result equals investment multiplied by 1.07, right? So this will be the 7% annually, 1.07. And this is to the power, so double asterisk, the power of years, right? So if we type this and we enter the result, we will have around $1,400 after 5 years of investment. If we change this to 10, obviously the value changes and we have a better result, around $1,967. Okay, so this is just a small calculation, so you can see how we can use variables and calculations within using these variables. Remember to use print. If we type print, I invested, and then I sum my investment, right? Remember, this is a numeric value, but then I can add the text, again, the string, and now I have the result. You'll see that it will, well, it gives me an error, obviously, because we cannot concatenate string and integers, right? So we will have to change these values, which, remember, we just did this. We can change one data type into another, right, using str, int, right? So maybe I will have to change this to string. So I'll put str in front of my numeric value. And again, the same for result, and this should now work. Okay, so now I invested 1,000. Now I have 1,967. Obviously, there's a space missing there, which I can add. I can also, well, I might be able to round this. How can we improve this? Yeah, so there I can put a $sign. All right, I can also put a $sign. Maybe I'll just round this here, right? So to 2 decimal places, for example. Okay, so that looks a bit better. And then maybe I can concatenate another $ onto the end, a $ and a point. Right, so there I have it. I've printed, I invested $1,000, and now I have $1,967.15. And we've done this using concatenation through sums with strings, okay? So now that you know what the data types are, that we have what string is, what integer is, what a float is, what Boolean is, but remember true and false, what variables are, right, and how we can assign numeric values to these variables. We've done a quick example of BMI. We've also done data type conversions and this quick S&P 500 example where we concatenated these values through sums. All right, so that's all for this class for variables and data types in Python. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next class. Hello and welcome to this class where we're going to talk about and explain what lists are in Python. They are a very used object, so it's very important that you understand what they are. So a list is basically an ordered and modifiable collection of elements. It's important to understand this, that it's ordered and modifiable. It has to be in a specific order, and it's also modifiable, and we'll see this in the practice. But it's also important to understand that lists can contain different data types. They don't all have to be numeric, they don't all have to be strings, they don't have to be all floats, right? In this example, we have an integer, right, a whole number. We have a string, which is text, and a Boolean, right? We can have different data types within our lists. Okay, so lists can contain different types of data, and items in a list are indexed and start with 0. This means that position 1 is actually position 0. We will see this in the next class when we start creating lists. We will practice on a new Jupyter notebook. We'll learn how to create a list, how to manipulate it. We'll talk about everything that can be done with lists, which is a very important topic in Python if you want to master it. Quick class on lists in Python. In the next class, we will create a Jupyter notebook and start working and get our hands dirty with lists in Python. So that's all. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you in the next class.